Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So glad to have you with us from Times Square here in New York. Kevin McCullough, glad to be part of That Kevin Show. And my next guest is exciting to have around. She is not only a kind of legendary figure in the world of business, but when President Trump went to Washington, D.C. and was trying to put kind of his outsider administration into the positions that they could impact really well, Linda McMahon's name came up for more than one position, but she ended up being his small business administrative head and did a great job in that post. And I'm glad to welcome her back tonight. Linda McMahon, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. It's good to be with you.
It's good to be with you. And just by way of reference, you are part of the America First Policy Institute, which is a bunch of you former Trump administrative people that had good impact in the areas that you had influence with, still trying to have part of the debate be impacted by what you're doing. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think a number of you will probably be back in President Trump's next administration, but that's just a guess. We'll have to wait and see how.
Well, it'd be an honor if that were to happen. Yes, I'm the chair of the America First Policy Institute, and within the Institute, I also chair the Center for the American Worker.
Yeah. Well, your fingerprint on the Small Business Administration was so important because, as people who listen to my show know, small businesses are responsible for about 3 out of every 4 new jobs that are created. And as we press forward into an economy that's going to need to recover from all of this regulation, stronghold, chokehold, really, that the current team has put in place, deregulating the regulations is important, and showing support for that small business community is absolutely vital.
Well, it truly is. And President Trump really did understand that. And when he asked me to serve as the administrator of the Small Business Administration, which is a whole mouthful to say, he said, I've got a novel idea. He said, I'd like to have somebody running this who's actually built a business and understands it, and understand the impacts of taxes and understands the impacts of the regulatory environment on businesses. And so I really did make that effort, to visit. I visited every district office, all 68 in all 50 states.
Wow.
And to listen to what was going on and to visit with small businesses. And I did press conferences while I was out there. We were pushing the Trump tax cuts, as well as listening to small businesses about what impact those tax cuts would have on their business, and also the regulatory cuts. And I never talked to a business owner who did not tell me that the savings they would realize would not be reinvested in their business. Right. And that's what they did. The tax cuts and, one of the write-offs, especially for capital investment, to be able to write it off in the year in which that expense was made, really gave small businesses the opportunity to grow and invest in their companies. And the economy was flourishing. Unfortunately, COVID came along, but the economy was really flourishing under those policies. And, from the regulatory side, the president had instructed every cabinet officer, for every regulation you want to put in, you've got to get rid of 2. And we wound up getting rid of 10 to 12, sometimes more regulations for each one that we put in. And so it was just it was the right answer. It supported businesses. It gave them the opportunity to have access to more capital with the economy flourishing the way it was. And we were just on a really good run.
What I don't understand, Linda McMahon, is well, I do understand it, because there's this assumption, I think, by the current team, the Biden team, that the American voter is stupid, and that they're just they're gonna buy old stereotypes, and they're just gonna be satiated with whatever Biden says on the campaign trail. I saw a hideous Instagram fake phone call from President Biden to what was supposed to be a Navy veteran in his home, and it was all about thank you, Mr. President, for being a decent man, and blah blah blah. People could care less if the top guy is tough or if he's easygoing. What they do know is that if their policies prevent them from hiring enough workers, or giving the people the raises that they need and have earned and have deserved, or they want to expand and offer greater numbers of services or products to the public, you don't get to that equation by adding bean counters inside the operation just to comply with all of the checklist of things that Washington wants you to do. And it seems to me that the Biden team may be kind of deaf on all of this, which is going to fall on deaf ears. That's fine. But I don't think that the workers are. And I think that what I'm sensing, and I live in a fairly blue state, but what I'm sensing is that there's a real anxiety about just what a chokehold regulation has put on this economy, and how we could get rid of it with a snap of a finger if somebody came in and would undo most of what Joe Biden did in those first few days.
You know, it's interesting, Kevin, because with President Trump losing and only been in one term, and then President Biden coming in and is almost at the end of his first term, it's no longer just this is what I'll do. From
right.
somebody who we actually have records to compare. You can take President Trump's record and put it down and look at the job growth, look at the economic growth during that period of time. You can compare it to President Biden's. I mean, he's raised taxes, and we don't have a revenue problem.
And this weekend bragging about how he's going to let that those tax cuts run out as though they were a bad thing.
Yeah, not only is he going to let them run out, he's actually said, I heard him say over the past couple of days, when he gets in office, if they're still there, he'll get rid of them. I mean, so he's bragging about the fact that he's going to raise taxes. He's going to get rid of, any of these things that are left that were absolutely spurring on our economy and the country was just literally flourishing. More jobs were being created, more businesses were getting started. There was a confidence level. And if you look now, I think the NFIB recently reported that business optimism, that's National Federation of Independent Businesses,
right.
They reported that business optimism is declining in the country, and it was just flourishing under the Trump administration. So Trump really knew and understood that business, small business especially, were the backbone of the economy. And anytime I traveled with him, and I did travel with him quite a bit when we were trying to pass his tax policy and the regulatory policy. And anytime I was in the audience and he was speaking about small business, he would always single me out and say, and Linda, we all know that small business is big business, right? And I would say, absolutely. You know, you're right about the job creation from small business, but also about 40% of the GDP comes from small businesses. So he had a great understanding of that. Biden's never been in the business world, except through some of the checks that he seems to get. He hasn't really built a business or understand how that works. It's all
the
about
big guy incorporated doesn't qualify as a small business, is what you're saying. Well, Linda, let me ask you this, and we may have to take a break and come back. But the country as a whole, and the situation that the country faces as a whole, you could narrow down these issues to just regulation, tax policy, incentives for businesses, et cetera. But I don't think there's any way to divorce the bodega owner from his store that President Trump stopped at in Harlem just last week when he was here attending to his trial. You can't divorce that bodega owner, not only from the tax policy and the job incentive policies and the other things that the executive branch can direct in terms of helping them, but the rest of the environment of the country.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.